With increasing frequency and intensity, the Fox propaganda network is becoming triggered that so many people are publicly questioning Donald Trump's mental fitness for office, including everyday Americans, Democrats, and even Republicans. And it's glorious. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert buttons before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have several clips to play in this video. I just want to set the stage that it's been a centerpiece of the Trump campaign's attacks against President Biden, as well as Republican attacks against President Biden in general, suggesting that President Biden is not cognitively fit for office. And to be sure, President Biden has lost a step. He's not the same man that he was in 2012 or, 2000 or 1912, as he would joke. But based on all reports from Republicans and Democrats who actively engage with the president, he is still sharp. He is still able to engage substantively on the matters. Kevin McCarthy reported it when he was Speaker of the House and engaging with Biden on the debt ceiling negotiations, right? Whereas Donald Trump has been perceived to be an idiot by dozens of former aides, including many high-ranking cabinet officials who worked with him, right? And then we're seeing increasing evidence of his cognitive decline over the past several months. I'm not going to inundate you in examples, but I am going to play one because it's hilarious, and two because it's relevant to the next clip.
These are not muscle guys here, they're muscle guys up here, right? And they calmly walk to a seat. Ding, 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 ding. They've only got 17 seconds to figure this whole thing out, right? Boom. Okay. Missile launch, pshin, boom.
So he's talking about United States missile defense. It's beautiful. Like it came straight out of a DOD video guide or whatever. So with that in mind, more and more people, including the Biden-Harris campaign, are starting to pounce on this and to try to reframe the narrative and say that, okay, listen, if you want to attack Biden on his gaffes, fair enough, but we have plenty to play with respect to Donald Trump. Jessica Tarlov made that point to her right-wing co-host on The Five, a Fox propaganda show.
Cognitive dissonance thing is fair game, though, and people want to minimize it and say, well, if he has 3 blunders and Joe Biden has 6, that's what it is. But the Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi mix-ups, the magnets and water, acting out missile defense systems, ding, 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 boom, whoosh. What kind of president?
Not much of one, right? But again, this illustrates an attempt by those of us on the left, those of us who are aligned with the Democrats to say, listen, okay, if this is how we're going to play it, then we're going to play it. And listen, in Trump's defense, the polling is on his side, or at least it has been, indicating that more Americans, many more Americans, are concerned about President Biden's perceived cognitive health than Donald Trump. However, we're starting to see a bit of a shift in the polls. This is a recent poll from ABC News Ipsos, and it has, on one of the attributes, has the mental sharpness it takes to serve effectively as president. 28%, only 28% of Americans believe that President Biden has the mental fitness, but less than half, 47%, only 47% believe Trump has mental fitness necessary for office. Trump's ratings for mental sharpness and physical health are both down 7 points from last May. Folks, this seems to be a sign that the public opinion is starting to shift. Even if Trump has an advantage, not even a majority of Americans believe that he has the mental or physical health to be president. And again, we're starting to see that being driven home in a way which is triggering elements of the Fox propaganda network. I'm going to bring you back to Jessica Tarlov again. And she is having this exchange with Sean Hannity, one of Trump's, if not Trump's closest ally, on the Fox propaganda network.
You want to talk cognitive decline? Yeah. I brought my own montage.
Nikki Haley mixed up with Nancy Pelosi one time, and a guy that can speak for 5 hours straight without making a mistake.
Just rambling is not speaking for 5 hours straight, including things like, look what happens when I put magnets in water and when I beat Obama in 2016. No, I don't sound like fake Jack. I sound like real Jessica Tarlov. And it's not a small thing. If Joe Biden had confused Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi, so they have in common the first letter of their names and that they're both a woman.
He has not had an incident-free speech or appearance where he mumbled, bumbles, and stumbled.
And you can see how Sean Hannity is starting to get worked up. He laughed it off at first, and he's like, okay, well, it was different. Well, the fact of the matter is that very few public speakers are able to deliver a speech without mumbling or making some sort of misspeaking. I consider myself a very effective public speaker. I'm speaking to you now improvisationally. And I'm 32 years old. I will stumble over my words. I will occasionally use the singular when I need to do the plural, okay? So it happens, but none of them are gaffe-free. Sean Hannity just doesn't like it that increasing attention is being paid to Trump's gaffes and not just Biden's. But it's not just Sean Hannity. So here's a Democratic operative who worked as a surrogate for, I know, the Obama administration, I think President Biden as well. He triggers Harris Faulkner and Kayleigh McEnany, who used to work for Donald Trump, just by pointing out that, again, we're starting to see a shift. We're starting to see some more attention paid to Trump's cognitive state than used to be.
We're going to have a replay of what we saw in 2020. And there's a lot of concerns, actually, that I've seen now recently with Donald Trump on the stuff.
You cannot compare the two.
Absolutely, we can. You know, last night he said he won New Hampshire in the general election. He lost it to Hillary Clinton, lost it to Joe Biden by 7 points.
You cannot compare the two.
Haley, he mixed up Nikki Haley. He mixed up Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi for minutes on end in his speech and came back to it. So there are a lot of verbal miscues. There's a lot of gaffes between these two men.
Two-thirds of the American people think that President Biden is too old. They do not say that about Donald Trump. So you can say this, you can make this argument, you can spew the dancing talking points.
It's not as high as Joe Biden, but a majority of people feel the same way about Donald Trump.
So you can see, then she starts to appeal to perception, right? So first she was saying you can't compare the two, suggesting that the facts were disparate, right? That Donald Trump isn't old and that Donald Trump is mentally fit for office. Harris Faulkner would later go on, we're not going to play that part because I've got a different clip for her. She would go on to say they're not the same men, they're not the same age. And she really wants to emphasize that. But the point is, first they try in impotence to defend Trump on the facts, but it's futile, right? So then she goes, oh, well, the perception is, 2/3 of Americans believe that President Biden isn't healthy enough to assume office. Okay, that's bad for Biden, sure. But we've been talking about that. You've all been talking about that. It's starting to get bad for Trump too, and you want to ignore it. And now you're appealing to the perception. And Walling was the last name of the Democratic surrogate there, was right. A majority of Americans don't believe that Trump has the mental and physical health to be president. And why would they? Because in addition to also being a gaffe machine and also being old, 77, about to be 78, he would be the oldest president in U.S. history upon inauguration if he is elected. If he wins the nominate or the presidency, right? But he's also an idiot, right? Biden is at least smart and educated on politics and can go in depth on politics and public policy and foreign policy and domestic policy and understands how governments work both domestically and internationally infinitely greater than Donald Trump. Imagine you put these two men in a room and talk to them and made them take a quiz about government and politics and civics. Biden would clean Trump's clock. And given that he would be the highest civic leader, it's probably important. So Kayleigh McEnany's like, well, the perception's different. But Walling is right to point it out. The thing is, it's not just Democrats. It's not just everyday Americans. It's also Republicans. It's people supposed to be Donald Trump's allies. You have a sitting Republican governor here, Chris Sununu of New Hampshire. He's also sparring with Harris Faulkner, about Trump's cognitive deficits.
This is the guy that was blaming Nikki Haley for January 6th and couldn't. If he's off the teleprompter, this is not Donald Trump of 2016, guys. So, if he's off the teleprompter, he can barely keep a cogent thought. I mean, that's just fact.
But you've seen him in person as many, probably more times.
I've worked with him very closely. He is not the same guy. This is not Donald Trump on his fastball. He didn't have a prompter last night. Yeah, look, this guy is nearly 80 years old. Thank you for your service. He's 77. Yeah, that's nearly 80. We'll do math later, but
it's so bad that even Sununu is publicly snarking. Like, what are you, an idiot? 77 isn't almost 80. They would have gone to the same high school together. They would have been, in the same high school had they gone, right? It's not like Donald Trump is 10, 15, 20 years Joe Biden's junior. They are peers in age. It's also Nikki Haley, Donald Trump's last remaining rival, who used to speak with utter deference and cowardice about Donald Trump. Even she is starting to publicly hit him, even if she thinks President Biden is worse.
We all saw what happened at the rally last night. That wasn't the first time. Go back and look. Here you've got a situation. I'm not saying he is in any way like Joe Biden, but Joe Biden is not what he was 2 years ago. We need a president for 8 years, even if you have a president for 4 years. The man was going on a rant about how I was keeping Capitol Police from going in on January 6th. He went on and on, mentioned my name multiple times, about the fact that I stopped people from being secure on January 6th. I wasn't in D.C. on January 6th. I had nothing to do with the Capitol. It's things like that. He said multiple times that he ran against President Obama. He didn't run against President Obama. These things happen because guess what? When you're 80, that's what happens. You're just not as sharp as you used to be. This is not personal. Y'all know I voted for him twice. I was proud to serve in his administration. This is the fact that we have a country in disarray and a world on fire, and we need to know that we are not giving our kids options of two 80-year-olds going into a presidency. We need to know that the person that's going to...
And there you go. And again, she's tried to adopt a respectful tone even now. But the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump, by the same standard you'd apply to Joe Biden, if you apply that standard to Joe Biden, Donald Trump isn't doing too well either. And that's why, to paraphrase John Lovett from Pod Save America, he said months ago, he's like, this contest is not about old versus crazy, right? Biden versus Trump. It's actually about old versus old and crazy. So Donald Trump is the worst bet by any margin, right? He is not in great mental health. He's also a moron. He's a malignant narcissist. He believes that he's entitled to absolute legal immunity for all crimes. And he has promised a campaign and a presidency of retribution and revenge. This is not a close contest between these two men. By every objective metric, President Biden is superior. And Fox News is struggling to cope with it. And now they're getting publicly triggered when they see evidence to the contrary. The last thing I'll say, I'll just remind you, Donald Trump is seeing a 7-point reduction in terms of how people perceive his mental sharpness and physical health. So people exposing the American people to the realities of Donald Trump's poor mental health, it's starting to manifest itself in the polling. And that's why President Biden and Democrats and all of us should be relentlessly hounding the American people about this and exposing Donald Trump's cognitive deficits. It's working. Let me know what you think in the comments.